Order, and Teresa, would you please call the roll?
Trustee Cook. Oh, yep. I'm sorry. Trustee Burgo. Trustee Gray.
Yes.
Trustee Johnson.
Here.
Trustee Lazio.
Here.
Trustee Burgo. Here. Trustee Lori, the Munyon. Trustee Pandolfi.
Yes, I did make it. Here.
Yeah.
Trustee Step. Trustee Thies.
Yes.
Trustee Weiss. Rita Weiss.
Yes.
Rita.
Yeah.
That's it, trustee. Trustee Wilson. Trustee Wykoff.
Here.
Yeah, four.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. The next matter is to approve the agenda. Could we have a motion for that, please?
So moved.
Second. A second. Any discussion? Okay, Teresa, would you please call the roll on this?
Trustee Wykoff.
Aye.
Trustee Weiss. Aye. Trustee Thies. Trustee Step. Trustee Pandolfi.
Aye.
Trustee Lazio.
Yes.
Trustee Johnson.
Aye.
Trustee Gray.
Yes.
Trustee Cook. Trustee Burgo. Here. Aye. Trustee Cook.
He's coming in behind you.
Yes.
How did you go for the approval of the agenda?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next matter is to approve the minutes from the previous budget process meeting, which was last year in May. With a motion to approve it.
I move for the approval of the minutes of the May 9th, 2023 meeting.
Second. I'll second it. Discussion. Okay, Teresa, will you please call the roll on this?
Trustee Burgo. Yes. Trustee Cook.
Yes.
Trustee Gray.
Yes.
Trustee Johnson.
Aye.
Trustee Lazio.
Yes.
Trustee Pandolfi.
Aye.
Trustee Thies. Trustee Weiss.
Aye.
Trustee Wykoff.
Here. Or aye, sorry.
Motion carries.
Yeah, I believe there are no visitor comments, and let's jump right into the work session.
All right, I'm gonna transition over here because I have a little bit of a presentation for everyone. Everyone doing today?
There you go.
All right.
There you go.
Right. All right. Take a swig of water. We got a new ice machine in our little kitchen area. It's wonderful luxury to have here at headquarters. So, welcome everyone to our first step in the fiscal year of the 24-25 budget process. Over the next 3 months, we'll define, propose, and ultimately approve final budget for our library system. That budget represents more than numbers and dollars. It will serve as a roadmap for our future. As we begin this journey together, I'd like to start where most great trips do, with a look at where we would like to be. We prepared some general numbers for you later, but in this portion of the presentation, I'm going to focus primarily on my vision for the library's future. As you all know, I arrived last January, or actually 2 Januaries ago now, just in time for the beginning of the budgeting process. But with that work beginning so quickly, there was little time to thoroughly evaluate our capacity, identify areas of opportunity, and set a trajectory for our long-term goals. Over the past year, I've spent time looking at the system, talking with my team, talking with each of you, and most importantly, getting to know our customers and learning about how they would like the library to evolve over time. That's really where I want to begin today. So in this presentation, we'll talk about the vision, how we begin moving in the right direction, and finally, what we need to do to make it possible. This is one of the first things I saw when I came here for my interview process. So I visited the Green Hills Library, and I remember after that long day was done, sun was setting and there were all these kids. This is in Greenhouse. This is Garth Oak, right? What is that?
No, that's green.
That's Greenhouse. Okay, yeah. Greenhouse. And I was just amazed. You know, there were kids in the library, 9 o'clock, relaxing and reading books. What a wonderful picture. I'm going to focus our budget discussion around three themes: people, planning, and places. These three themes intertwine in our future work, so let's take them one at a time. People is the most appropriate place to start because libraries are primarily about the people we serve, about the people who make the service possible. About these people. There you go. Yeah. The children who come into our libraries and stuff their bags with as many books as they can carry. The homeschool communities who attend our programs and use our resources. The retired folks who attend author talks and book discussions, and those among us who just find solace in our library spaces. And about these people. Your faces there. Our own staff who work each day to provide a better library experience for our future. Our customers are always our primary focus, and their numbers are growing. We're currently closing in on the highest number of active users in our history. This chart shows the drop off during COVID and the consistent rebuilding of that customer base. Like that animation? Yeah. It's striking though. Not only is the customer base growing, but they're also using us more. Last year, the library circulated the most items in its history, and we're on pace to exceeding that number again in 2024. Likely going over 10 million checkouts for the first time in our history. To put it into context, when I share this with my colleagues across the country, I remember just recently I was sharing what our monthly circ, and it was 800 and something thousand or maybe 900. And I left off the time frame. They're like, well, how many months is that? I'm like, that's 1 month. So it's a significant increase and really helps us understand how relevant we are in the community. So as we've discussed, circulation is a huge part of our circulation growth, and nearly 50% of that is digital content, which remains frustratingly for all libraries more expensive to purchase than physical materials. Program attendance continues to increase. Children's programming is regularly at capacity and demand continues to grow. I'll talk more about our new community-led model for programming in a bit. But there remains a need for further investment in our core programs, especially those aimed at fostering early literacy. And because of our capital investments, we're seeing our building used more and more. Meeting room use has exploded over the last 3 years. I've talked about this before, but as you can see, we're positioned to experience a usage level 6 times higher than what we saw in 2018 and 2019. We want to see that pace of growth continue. And to do so, we're looking to remove barriers to better serve our communities. Doing that means an increase in staff time to care for the rooms and increased maintenance costs to care for heavily trafficked spaces. We believe doing this is the right thing to do. After all, the taxpayer paid for it, it's theirs to use. Our libraries are anchors of the community, and we want those spaces to be freely available and used as much as possible. All of this shows that our community continues to invest their time and energy in this. So we must also invest in providing them with high quality services and resources that they deserve. This means that we need to maintain much of what we currently do despite higher costs. But I also think it means creating more opportunities for our community to shape their own library experiences. I've spoken with each of you at various points throughout the year about my desire to strengthen the connection between our community members and our branches. I'm sure you would all agree. I mean, I really appreciate what Tiara Dixon shared with us last month about the ways in which her branches interact with Camden Point, Dearborn, and Edgerton communities. I believe it's important that we use her work as a model to create more opportunities for meaningful engagement with our community partners. So we've made good strides in that direction. Our new reader engagement department combines reader services, youth services, and programming staff, and it aids us in the efficient delivery of culturally relevant programs for people of all ages. Over the past year, I've also appreciated the deep roots that our library has in genealogy and storytelling, which fills a unique role in our region. I want to further that work by positioning Mid-Continent Public Library to be the voice of our service area. telling our story in a way that truly reflects the values and characters of our region. A little later this evening, I'm going to share a video with you guys. It's part of a series that we built out over the past year. It's called Nice to Meet You. It's wonderful, but I'll let you judge for yourself. It's a preview of a series that staff are creating, tell stories of people from our area. It's one way that we can help build community in a world where there are fewer opportunities to do so. When you talk to family historians, you realize that the work isn't just about dates or ship logs or cemetery maps. It only comes alive when human stories enter the mix. A modern day preservation of those stories is a valuable resource that this library can provide. I really do believe that we're uniquely positioned to help our community create, document, and preserve its stories for those who come after us. The content that we would digitize will offer an authentic record, uninfluenced by media bias or political agendas, a true picture of what it's like to work in this region. Many of you were there for my initial interview over a year ago, and I remember posing the question to you guys saying, what should an outsider like me take away from the things they read online? And it led to this great conversation, but it was kind of a leading question, and I had the answer in my head already, like, not much. It doesn't tell you much about who we are and what our values are. It only tells you what the values are of the media outlet that wrote the article. So what I'm proposing is that we begin to really tell the modern story of Platte, Clay, and Jackson counties. So that's how we plan to engage and serve our people. But to do that, we must also focus on the people we depend on to provide service every day. We got here. Oh, yeah, got her. They're the people you've met at board meetings over the last year. They're the people you see in branches every day. And they're the people here in this building working behind the scenes to support the entire library system. We've been working over the past year to ensure that our structure is as sound and as efficient as possible, so that any personnel investment we make is able to align with our vision for the future. We've undertaken some restructuring to invest in areas that will move our system forward. By restructuring several departments and repurposing existing positions without adding overall headcount to my note, we're continuing our commitment to ongoing evaluation of structure and capacity. When positions are needed, we weigh that request against its alignment with goals and needs. Some of these, like the 2 finance department positions, are a result of a need to modernize a system that has been largely untouched for a number of years. Others, like the digital media position, come from the aspirations we're laying out for the next few years. Again, just all of the new positions created in 2023 and 24 came from attrition or reallocation of current positions. But we're very close to that position limit, and we may need to revisit the cap to achieve our goals. Excuse me for one moment. I learned from Tiara, take a sip during the speech. But while we talk about these positions, we must also keep pace with competitive pay, especially for our frontline staff. Recent budgets have given us the ability to make great strides on competitive pay, but environmental trends like Missouri's index minimum wage movement mean we must remain proactive on that front. We also want to work on building a more cohesive culture across our system. This is no small task when staff are in 34 locations, spread out over a region roughly the size of Rhode Island. But it's important for us to succeed at the highest level. That's another thing that just stuck with me from the moment I arrived. How do you shape a culture at this scale? And we have great plans to do that, and we're beginning that work in early April. And we'll tell you more about that as the time comes, as time moves on. In this budget, we'll look at additional staff training opportunities, engagement tools that will allow us to get better, more thoughtful staff feedback. These offers will be led by Cody Crone. Cody, can you hear us? And maybe he doesn't have his mic on.
Yes, I can hear you, Aaron.
All right, that was Cody. All right. Cody recently became our new organizational communications manager, just one of the realignment moves I previously mentioned. And finally, we want to engage our staff in new ways to take full advantage of their skills and creativity. The 800 plus people who work for Mid-Continent Public Library are individuals with different experiences, values, and perspectives. We will become a more well-rounded and innovative organization if we afford them the space to explore their ideas. Within the budget, I will be proposing a program that allows staff to apply for internally funded innovation grants to pilot programs, services that will better serve our community. Allowing staff to pursue creative, thoughtful projects can invigorate those who care deeply about public service and library operations. This program will allow staff's collective expertise to produce groundbreaking system-level innovations. It provides an opportunity to embrace small-scale failure, which can be as instructive as successes, but are often avoided at a larger scale due to public scrutiny and cost. By giving our staff a chance to be innovative and experiment on a micro level, will stimulate growth and retain our best employees. Again, libraries are for people. So our plans for the upcoming year truly revolve around serving the people who support and utilize us, and subsequently the people who serve them. The second theme for the budget is planning. And this one is layered. So I've been here just over a year, and most of that year has been spent finishing up projects that have been started long ago. We've now had some time to consider what the future should look like and have prioritized this work and the goals presented in January. Many of these ideas, however, are at the very least multi-year. Thus, it's impossible not to recognize the need to make planning a significant part of our focus and investment for the upcoming year. This also means thinking this year about what resources we need in subsequent years to achieve the plans we are preparing. At the highest level, it's time for us to begin the process of reworking our strategic plan. The previous plan, which was put in place in 2018, was intended to carry the organization through the end of the capital plan. And now that we've reached that point, we can look forward to the future and how to focus our work on the impact we can make on varied communities. I would like to engage a guide to that process who can help us imagine possibilities, but who also understands the vital need of our everyday work. As you all noted in my goals for this year, alongside that strategic planning, we need to take a closer look at our library district and address underserved communities in each of the 3 counties. In areas like South Kansas City, we need to look at the partnerships that align with our mission and strengthen ties to key strategic organizations. Our Farview location is a notable example of a partnership that has proven successful and has potential for growth and replication. This will take thoughtful consideration and a close examination of needs. We began our work last year with a community needs assessment. But we now must begin to look outside to those who can help us chart a course. If these explorations suggest a course of action that requires resources, we need to be planning for where those resources will come from and how we balance them with current needs. Another place we need to enlist the support of others is in addressing the building we're sitting in. I'm sure you all are aware, our headquarters building is in need of attention. And if you're wondering what this picture is, it's actually the aerial view of a 360 mapping of the whole headquarters facility. I thought it was so beautiful that we would put it up. Our offices don't look like this, but nonetheless, it is a scan of our building. And now I just got off script, so now I got to find my place again, but we're in need of attention, yes. So the commitment during the capital plan was to address public spaces first, but as the years have gone by, the building has continued to age. This room is by far the most modern room in the building. The remainder of the building hasn't seen significant or even moderate attention in decades. Addressing the many maintenance needs of this building will require a significant financial commitment. Perhaps we can invest the time and money to address these issues, but there's an even more fundamental challenge. The staffing model we employ today bears little resemblance to the one in place when the facility was planned in the 1960s. We're also left with several unanswered questions. What's the appropriate number of staff needed for the headquarters of the future? Should an investment of this size be reserved solely for staff, or should a portion of the building be open to the public? As I mentioned earlier, we've been working to realign staff to better achieve our vision, but the ability for that realignment to pay dividends is hampered by the building's physical constraints. We plan to begin that evaluation as soon as possible, and I will also plan to organize a tour of this building for anyone who's interested in the coming months. The final planning initiative originates around my goals as well. That's around my first goal to launch an exploratory phase of implementing digital solutions that promote creative storytelling and community-driven initiatives, as well as meaningful engagement for our expanding service area. The goal calls for staff to present to the board a comprehensive report that evaluates the implementation of piloted digital solutions and creative storytelling initiatives, such as the video series I just mentioned. This report calls for staff to consider budget implications for these efforts in the future years as well. And lastly, oh, and by the way, that's from a yearbook at Raytown. And I love this gentleman's hair, so if you're gonna do nice hair. But I just want to be clear, when we talk about digitization, and after you watch this video, what we're not proposing is producing videos. I think we could create kind of a world-class digital collection of images, of scans of yearbooks, of oral histories, and possibly videos that really tell people of the future what life is like today. So I do love genealogy, but I got to tell you, the further you go back in history, the less interested I am. And when I worked in Cleveland, young people would come in and go, where are the pictures from the 90s? And be like, we don't have it, And in this new digital world, who is it that's responsible for preserving the images of today? It's not like it used to be, where you could go out and buy a collection from a newspaper or, photographer. Everything's contained in your phone. And my fear is that the development in this region will be lost if we don't preserve it. So, as I stated, the final theme is places. And as this system has worked for the last decade to provide better places and spaces for the people it serves, the physical footprint of the system has both grown and improved. That large lift is almost finished, and this spring we will open the last 2 branches included in our capital plan. Upon completion, these will undoubtedly become valuable community assets. Now that we have these assets in place, we need to be sure that we're planning to keep those assets maintained. And to that end, we commissioned a firm to help us develop a long-term capital maintenance plan. We received preliminary results from that firm, and we're working on a long-term strategy to ensure that we have the resources to commit to that maintenance. There's no doubt that the capital plan has been a great success, but its benefits were not distributed evenly across the system. As I referenced earlier, some of our communities still are in need of evaluation and investment. Take, for instance, the area right here in North Independence. The North Independence branch, there we go, that's the basement and that's the cafe. It was mostly exempt from the improvements of the current plan. But that makes sense when you consider the fact that when the original plan was completed in 2014, the North Independence branch was only 4 years old. Now it's 14, and the community surrounding the branch has changed. The other facility in North Independence is the Farview Neighborhood Library, a location that's very dear to me. That was one of the places that I also visited on my first visit to Kansas City. But it didn't exist when the current plan was developed. Being born out of a partnership, it received a level of investment commensurate with a pilot project. That pilot project has now proven itself, but the space is in need of investment. I ask you to imagine, what could these spaces provide with the right partners and amenities? We also need to find a way to invest more in some of our rural branches that received only modest improvements during the plan. We continue to gain insights into how these communities utilize their libraries differently and how modest upgrades could accommodate those varied uses. And finally, as we mentioned in the planning section, we must begin to prepare to address our headquarters facility once we more fully understand the options before us. And to that end, we should begin to set aside resources that might otherwise go to Band-Aid fixes for the aging facility. Now in April, we will share the results of the facilities or the maintenance. But initial numbers price that Band-Aid, just HVAC, roof, that sort of thing, in the neighborhood of $8 to $11 million. And so that's something we need to think about as a group. Do you want to put the Band-Aid at that expense, or do you want to think about a different option? So in conclusion, this year promises to be very eventful, with planning for the future, new initiatives to launch, and above all, our commitment to excellent service for our growing customer base. We have much to do in the next fiscal year, and it begins with committing to our plan for the budget. I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy now. He's prepared a very exciting presentation. And then after which we'll reconnect. But the one thing I really want to drive home here is that we're in the planning phase. This is the first pass with broad strokes of our budget. And I think our success of last year was due to the fact that there was this great degree of transparency and collaboration between the board and staff when it came to revising the budget. And so we understand that this will go through many iterations before we land on the final budget. But Jeremy's here to prepare the numbers as they are today. Jeremy?
Good afternoon, everybody. We're excited to share with you our initial impressions on the 24-25 budget. As Aaron just mentioned, we're very early in this process, so many of the details are still to be worked out. But we believe it's important to share with the board and our community the plan to strategically move the library forward. As Aaron noted, we're committed to a transparent and a collaborative budget process, and there will be several opportunities for both the public and the board to participate. Today, we'll be presenting three perspectives. Each one serves a different purpose, but all are useful for understanding our budget in context. The first perspective to share with you is the initial staff budget request. We began this process by requesting that each team develop a reasonable spending plan to address their needs with no revenue considerations given. We did this to determine if there are any gaps in our current spending plan that need to be addressed in the future. This first slide that you're seeing represents this initial staff budget request. The top line represents staff wages and benefits. This plan would fund 413 full-time and half-time benefit eligible employees, as well as approximately 400 non-benefited part-time employees to help operate the branches. This plan also continues our commitment to the employees toward market competitive pay. This proposal, including benefits, would allocate around $39.04 million, or 7% more than our current budget. The next line represents the materials in our branches. Some examples of the type of expenses in this category are books, ebooks, e-audiobooks, magazines, various periodicals, CDs, DVDs, databases, and other electronic resources, and the processing cost of these materials. The initial staff budget request was $12.48 million, or 17% more than the current year. When the budget is fully presented later, you'll see that the library is beginning to shift some of this funding from physical to digital to address the shift in utilization that Aaron mentioned that we're seeing in our patrons. However, the main reason for the increase was actually to address increasing cost for these materials. These extra dollars would be used to purchase more materials, to maintain the holds ratios that we currently have, and to help address the increased demand for the digital content that is growing year over year. The next line represents programming. The summer reading program, the winter reading program, our adult book clubs, our mission enhancements, and all of the other programs that we offer to our patrons throughout the year are all reported here. The initial staff budget request was $1.16 million, or 20% more than the current year. These additional dollars were geared toward expanding those programs that are offered within the branches, such as adding an additional new adult author series. And then the last line is operations. A lot of different expenses are charged to this category, but the largest expenditures are for technology services, contractual services, building maintenance, voice and data services, utilities, and insurance. Technology services is an all-encompassing and covers both hardware and software expenses. Some of the significant areas within this budget are contractual services for IT repair, data center expenses, new and replacement devices for the district, network management expenses, and all the various softwares used to assist our patrons and run the district. Some of the new items that were included in the initial staff budget request were a website refresh, replacement of the patron self-checkout system, replacing the Woodneath book return system, and various security and network management solutions. The contracted services are primarily expenses for outsourcing building cleaning, lawn care, and security services. The initial staff budget request for operations was $13.84 million, which is about a 20% increase over the current year. So the total initial staff budget request was $66.53 million, which is about 11.5% above the current year budget, excluding the $9.35 million transfer in this year's budget to the capital project. Excuse me, sorry. However, as the leadership team gathered to review these initial budget requests, we all noticed that while all of these expenditures are good for the system, it did not provide us with any flexibility to work toward the goals that have been established. So we decided as a team that we needed to scale back on these expenditures, establish a baseline budget so that we could have adequate funding to plan for our future. Our baseline budget goes to our core services and the necessary costs to maintain those at their current level for our patrons. This next slide shows that second perspective, the baseline budget. You'll notice that most of the changes from the previous slide occurred in the materials section and the operations section. This was deliberate by our team as we believe that for our system to remain strong, the baseline budget should not reduce the commitment to market competitive wages and benefits that we have made to our employees. So the top line remains the same. The second line materials dropped to $10.81 million. While this reduced spending plan will not improve the hold times within our system, it does align our overall spending with historical trends. The next line, programming, was reduced to $1.06 million, which was mostly from reducing some of those expanded programs I mentioned earlier. And the last line, operations, was reduced to $10.8 million. This is where most of the reductions occurred. However, the reductions, as you'll see in a moment, are really the library opting to shift our focus from the current operation to, in a few areas, to invest in the future, as Aaron had laid out in his presentation. So some of those reductions were in technology services and building maintenance for branch support, as noted earlier, and will provide capacity for the capital maintenance plan and also a strategy for funding headquarter improvements, as Aaron mentioned in his presentation. We'll go through these recommended strategic investments in the next slide, but we think it's really important to note that this is a preliminary look at what funding of these investments could look like within the context of our budget. Those plans will have much more public and board participation as they are fully developed throughout the budget process. The baseline budget is $61.71 million, which is a 3% increase over the current year, excluding the transfer to capital, and a $4.81 million reduction from the initial staff budget request. This next slide shows the baseline with the strategic investments and is our third perspective. You'll note that some of these changes will appear minor compared to our baseline budget, but we think it's important to show the full investment of these goals. First, we recommend investing an additional $200,000 in the expansion of ebooks. This will help further supplement the increased demand that we're seeing from our patrons. Next, we're recommending investing $1.28 million in new and expanded digital initiatives. These dollars will help support Goal 1. We recommend the inclusion of additional staff to lead this effort, and we're estimating around $100,000 for the additional personnel. We're also estimating 1.18 million for the expansion of the technology services that I noted previously, as well as the startup costs for the digitization services that Aaron addressed. This full plan will be developed and presented to the Technology Committee in April. Next, we recommend investing $1 million to begin the future funding of capital needs for the branches. As Aaron mentioned in his presentation, Navigate has been working with us for several months and is close to helping us develop that long-term funding strategy. Over the next few weeks, we'll begin to formulate that plan for next year, and we'll gather board feedback on the plan throughout the budget process. Next, we're recommending $1 million to future planning and maintenance of headquarters. These dollars will help support Goal 3. As Aaron outlined in his presentation, we have concerns about this facility, but we also want to be mindful of the best use of our resources. So we need to study whether making all the improvements necessary at our current facility or finding a different location is more cost-effective to the district. These plans will be further explored by the building committee in April. Lastly, we're recommending investing $650,000 to explore the expanded services in our under-resourced communities, as Aaron mentioned. These dollars will help support Goal 4. As Aaron pointed out in his presentation, this is a goal for our library, and we intend to begin studying where the library can best assist these communities and build capacity within our budget for those needed services. So these strategic investments would add $4.13 million to the baseline budget, giving a revised budget of $65.84 million, which is about 10% more than our current budget, excluding that transfer to capital. We believe that a fully restored levy could support this budget, but we'll continue to refine our expense estimates to fit our revenue estimates throughout the budget process. I'll now turn it back over to Aaron, who will provide information on the meetings that we'll have over the next several months where both the public and board can participate in this process.
Thanks, Jeremy. Well, I know everybody was expecting to see spreadsheets, but I don't really have any today. I mean, they exist, but I really feel like the time to get into the weeds and to go through line item is at the committee level later in April. I would say we have a good idea as to how our budget lays out. But when we present it to you in April, then we can really get into the details and talk about where investments should be made or maybe where we can dial things back. My goal here today really is to get your feedback on these priorities as they align with the goals. The numbers obviously are open to debate, but I think they're kind of modest investments to help us move forward in the coming years. I mean, the calendar is the calendar, but again, I think it's structured in this way that we can continue on in the way we did last year. So as we did last year, any budget that's shared with any committee will be accessible to everyone else on the board. And then the committee chairs will then report out on what they thought about each budget. And from there, we'll kick it back over to finance to give a final review, and we'll have a special board session to go over the whole budget again in its entirety. And then hopefully, we'll have approved budget in June, and approve a levy that supports that budget in September. So that's that. What's the next slide? Just as a reminder, these are the priorities that I outlined. With digital content, I do want to say that the costs are rising. So even in our first pass of the budget, we had to take into consideration that ebooks and e-audio, the costs are going up each year. There's little we can do to stop that. But nonetheless, the demand is strong and we want to meet users where they are and give them the resources that they need. The advantage to these digital initiatives that I outlined is that the ownership rests with us. We're creating digital content that's owned and preserved by Mid-Continent Public Library. To call ebooks or to refer to ebooks as being purchased isn't actually, it's accurate. It's licensed and it goes away. But investment in preserving our own history means we own it forever. And it's us who gets to tell the story of our community. The headquarters, the numbers are staggering. So we really need to think long and hard about what an appropriate plan of action is for this building. No, it's not falling down today, but that $8 to $11 million price tag I put on it all refers to things that are nearing their end of life. Such as our roof or the HVAC system or the fire suppression system. Absent from the budget is an investment in the HVAC system for the server room. I'm still on the fence about this one, but we're holding back on these investments until we really know what direction we're going. So that's something that the board should be aware of, that those expenses aren't included in this budget. But I'll turn it over to you. If you have any questions or feedback, I'm happy to answer any question I can. Or you could say it was an awful presentation. Yes.
So the ebooks, so they're licensed for just a few years, or how does that work?
Yeah, so Susan, you want to share a little bit about how that works?
It depends on the publisher. Most of them are for 2 years. The license goes away after 2 years. Some of them are 26 checkouts. So after the 26th person, if we want to keep the copy, we have to repurchase. So there are and they check out just like a regular book does. So it's one copy, one user. There's not, if you three wanted to read the same book, you have to read it, and then you have to read it, and then you have to read it, or we need 3 copies. So it doesn't change. It's not any different than checking out a physical book. It's just how more often, how frequently we have to repurchase the license.
So even renewals?
Yes, renewals count as well.
It was like 2.
That would be 2
So
checkouts.
what is your, I guess I'll call life of ownership cost, digital versus physical?
Well, digital, we can get up to 26.
No, but I mean, if you have to buy it 3 times, what's that cost you?
An average cost of an adult title costs us about $28. It depends on the title for the fiction. They run anywhere from $35 to $130 per license. The last Stephen King novel was $129.99 per license. We could buy the book for $28. So, you could buy 4 copies for one.
And then then it doesn't disappear.
The books don't,
Yeah,
unless
that's what
somebody
I'm
doesn't bring
saying.
it back.
Right.
But
Wow,
the
that's-
digital will goes away after,
Yeah, I
depending
don't.
upon the publisher, 26 times, like 2.
I like to ask dumb questions, sorry. So after the digital wave has passed,
Mhm.
what can you buy with physical? Is it still the rack retail price or do you buy it at a discount?
No, it's the same price. Unless the publisher has changed the pricing.
So we have to go through the publisher, correct?
You do.
Yes.
When you look at those, like when the outsider looks at those trends, I think, oh, well, that means no one's coming to the library. And as we saw today, it's actually not true. I mean, maybe people prefer to read in that format. But our gate count is up and continues to increase each month. And there's also something else that's not apparent when you look at ebook trends, is that there's a segment of our collection that doesn't really fall into the ebook category. So when we're talking about children's books, there really isn't a digital replacement for them. They don't function the same way on a tablet. So that percentage of spending remains fixed, or we might have tweaked it a little bit. And we predict there to be strong demand. If I had to guess, my gut feeling is that there's a plateau at some point where digital adoption will just flatten, because not everybody can read or is comfortable reading in that format. But for the time being, I think this budget is what it is, and we're making adjustments to meet demand.
Not everything is automatically converted to an ebook or an e-audio. That's publishers, what they figure out, like Stephen King, they can make a lot of money off. That's what they're going to put into e-content backlist. We're still going to have to buy physical copies or obtain them through interlibrary loan.
Where do audiobooks fit? Are they considered ebooks or?
We have both. We have physical and we have e-audio. And e-audio is just as expensive as an ebook. And it also has similar licensing rules and guidelines around it where it's either 26 checkouts or 2 years.
And the audio is like a book?
It's like, yeah, they're on the shelves.
Like a CD or.
Yeah, books on CD. And that market is actually driven by the car industry. So
That's
interestingly enough,
You can't play it in. the
you
car.
can't play it in your car, check it out. Yeah. Car seat.
Well, so audiobooks like they're living, I'm not talking physical
Mhm.
CDs, that you're saying that's about the same cost as the ebook?
It can be, or sometimes they're a little bit
or
more.
similar. So how do we sit in terms of circulation of physical, like CDs anymore? You know, my last car didn't have a CD player. This one does, and I never use it, which is weird. It's hidden someplace. But so are we still buying as many CDs?
Physical CDs have flatlined and gone down because most people are going to the e-content. In fact, that's our biggest growth area. I mean, ebooks are going up too, but e-audio has exploded in the last couple of years. Joycelyn.
The other thing we need to keep in mind when we talk about the cost of these, ebooks, e-audio is an accessibility issue as well. People who have low vision or no vision or failing vision often would choose an e-audio book. So it's not like we can just make them go away and save money. People still need to be able to access and
Yeah.
participate.
When visiting Jefferson City, like down to each representative, and I can't remember meeting one that didn't have Libby on the cell phone. So people my age or older tend to kind of favor either listening to it as they drive or reading it on a tablet because you can enlarge the screen. But there's things to think about. So if the trend continues and it's decided in years to come that we're going to shrink the size of the collection, the physical collection, what impact does that have on the layout of each of our buildings? The buildings are still being used, just how they lay out will be a little bit different. You'll see with Riverside, we shrunk the size of that collection by roughly 60%, am I right? It probably won't be too noticeable to the average user, but our reason for doing that is we're really kind of putting a square peg in a round hole. We opened up more space for collaborative work. And I think it'll work well for that community. And if predictions are right, I don't think we're gonna see a decline in circulation. We may even see an uptick just because it's a new building. The collection is easier to navigate. And the building itself is much more user friendly than the one we currently have. It's those, I mean, the elephant in the room really is how do you invest in under-resourced communities? And what is the formula for a sound savings plan for capital maintenance? I think those conversations will be more meaningful once we get the Navigate report back so we can actually react to it and see what those numbers are.
Okay.
So that was one of my questions, because my radar always goes up when somebody uses a nice round $1 million. So are these just placeholders for the time being? You have branch capital fund $1 million, you have headquarters planning of $1 million, which seems like a lot, but so are those placeholders until you get a better estimate? Or is that based on some initial what I'll call hard estimates?
Well, capital maintenance, I'd say, I mean, I'm reacting to a number that I haven't, you know, that we're not ready to talk. I mean, I've seen the rough number. Yeah. I'm not really sure how. I mean, it's a 10-year plan. I mean, we need to, we're gonna have to shift within that. The number may be larger, depending on what we decide to do. Headquarters also, I guess the message I'm saying to the board is for headquarters and under-resourced communities, if you want to plan for that, right? If that's the directive, we need a plan. There have to be resources connected to it. I mean, in the sense that you'll be developing a plan for something that you can't fund. And so the question is, what's the right amount of resources to put behind it? We'll know more as time goes on, once we really start looking into these areas. But back to my earlier point, our process is always collaborative. No one's asking for a bucket of money that has like an ATM card attached to it. Together, staff and the board prioritize the work that needs to be done throughout our system. And then we'll see what it takes to fund them. I mean, yes, there's some reasoning put behind it, but I'm surprised to hear you say it was high. Given what I know, go about, I mean, look, North Independence is what, 48,000 square feet? Right?
Yeah.
You have an inactive basement that was once used as a reference library that I think could be transformed into new. There's design fees there, there's construction fees to renovate that space. The same goes for the cafe. It's like a domino effect. If you activate that upstairs space by the entrance, then you have to take into consideration the periodical area, the magazine areas, the north, it's that north, I get my directions, north area of the building. And you know, how do you renovate that space as well? And we shouldn't forget, we just demolished a building and just left sod there. I mean, not left, but what I'm saying is that's another consideration for a branch like that. What are you gonna do with that space? Do you wanna activate it? Do you wanna landscape it? So right there, I mean, you're looking at a pretty significant investment in a building that's been neglected for a number of years. And when you talk about under-resourced communities, that community has changed. It's an area of really great need. And I think they're as deserving of a quality experience as residents of the Green Hills community. And the same goes for the people at Farview. Recently, I had a wonderful meeting with the superintendent of Fort Osage School District. Just to get to know him and learn more about the school system, but also to talk about that Farview property and what's the best use of it. It may be just, and the best idea might be to stay there, or it could be transitioning that service somewhere else where it has a greater impact. But this is the type of work that we're proposing right now.
Charge. I'd like to get back also to under-resourced communities. I'm gonna talk about Jackson County only because I'm more familiar with Jackson County. So I'll start with how many school districts in Jackson County do not have a library facility? Our library for Mid-Continent.
I can't think of one.
They all do.
They all
No, I
do.
don't, yeah.
They do.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think Center does.
Yeah, Center does.
Yeah, they do. Red Bridge. Red Bridge.
Red Bridge is in the Center School District
Yes,
and
Separate.
Blue Ridge is in the Hickman Mills office.
correct.
Okay. So and I think this may or may not matter. What's the student population at Center? Is it like 2,600? Under 3,000?
Oh, I don't have, I don't.
My point is that probably the library, it's student oriented. Is that probably the library that Center students would go to is Red Bridge?
Probably.
And I don't think it takes too long to get there. I realize school districts vary by size. And I assume then that Blue Ridge is probably like the home library of Hickman Mills. So I guess and we don't need, whenever we're gonna talk about, I don't know what under-resourced communities are in Jackson County. I don't know whether he wants to answer that or not at this point.
In Jackson?
Jackson.
Well, I mean, part out east, I mean, I look at Oak Grove and Lone Jack, maybe not Lone Jack, but a few others far out east. Obviously, the North Independence locations that I mentioned. And then when you get into southern Kansas City, those would be the ones that stand out. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but the slide when I was referring to rural libraries was an aerial view of Camden Point. And that really demonstrates that is a building in complete isolation from other aligned organizations, or even governmental entities. I think there's a post office and a fire station out there. And really, I think of those three as one, and I want to think about how to connect them, and best connect with the community that they serve. I believe one school district spans across those three, right? Camden
Yes.
Point, Dearborn, and Edgerton.
Yeah, North Platte.
North, yeah. So we have a lot of planning to do. But again, further you get along in planning, at some time the rubber meets the road and you have to make a decision. And right now, I don't know what the answer is. Is the answer to add another bookmobile or a fleet of vehicles to serve people in rural communities? Or is it to enhance one of the locations to make it more of a destination place? I don't have that answer for you today, but these are the types of things we'll be researching in the coming year. It's an interesting puzzle to solve. There's a lot to be done, but I just want to caution everyone that, myself included, I get fixated on the new shiny ones, right? And they're so wonderful, and you're like, well, no repairs are gonna be needed for the next 20 years. But aside from those 6 or whatever destination locations, there's a number of other locations that are in need of maintenance. And what I don't want to do is position this organization financially in a way that's going to be a real liability for the director that comes after me. Because who was I talking to? I was talking to someone about, like, you visit like a city hall, like in Philadelphia or wherever, and you can see that they've spared it maintenance for so long that eventually it becomes so overwhelming, they have to go back to the taxpayer to make upgrades, you know? I won't point any fingers, but it's very common in cities all across the country. Yeah, and we are a world-class organization, and I wouldn't want us to be in that position. Because I most certainly do not want to go back to the taxpayers to ask for an increase in our approved levy.
I know that's one of your 5 points, and so I assume we're probably in the next year, we'll talk about under resource. I just kind of wanted to get a starting point as to what that means, and you points like capital also. Yeah, I think in Jackson, I think every school district probably has a library. In Jackson.
Yeah. I think so.
One more point, I'll stop making points. But a fifth of our full-time staff roughly work here in this building, you know. And I mean, they do an excellent job, they're productive. But the space is confining, and I think really does limit the ways they can serve library system. It's a huge chunk of people. And over the year, with the help of Richie and with Jennifer, we've really evaluated capacity and tried to make the best of what we have by reallocating resources or leaving positions unfilled. I've thought, well, you could, you know, like, what's the breaking point? And I would say, when Jennifer and I have been going back and forth for the last month, I mean, incremental changes to personnel costs at headquarters end up yielding like maybe a fraction of a percent at a real cost to the end user. So it's something to think about. When you look at those bars, you're like, oh, well, they're relatively small and, you know, in comparison to the overall budget. But if the thought is that you could keep tightening the belt to make up that gap, I can't really see a way that we could do it right now without it having an effect on our community. So that's my professional opinion at this point in my history here, but I mean, it's been a very informative year, and I really am amazed at what this library system does with the amount of money it has at its disposal. By comparison, where I came from, their operating budget is way above ours, and it's a smaller system confined to a single city with fewer number of branches.
Pretty amazing.
It is, it's got a great team.
A couple comments. You're thinking about some of the project goals and things that you enumerated, that I liked hearing the idea of internally funding small programs, piloting that way. I like that. Engaging for a guide for strategic planning, not trying to do this in-house, you know, just guesswork in-house. I liked hearing that. And of course, preparing for future work, capital work, and addressing headquarters, all of those things. I'm wondering, you know, we're now closing in on the fourth quarter of the school year for the Independent School District that made a dramatic shift from 5 days to 4 days. And I'm wondering, you know, at some point, not today, I guess, but to hear from our staff and the, you know, north and south branches and to some degree Farview, because you have Independence District kids that live out that direction. What, if anything, has been the impact in terms of library usage? Because I know, I mean, anecdotally, through kids, you know, I have a student at Christmas, he's a sophomore. Kids don't have access, a lot of kids don't have access to the internet now on one of their days a week. And has that brought them to the libraries is all, that's what I would be curious to know. Also, the interiors of those buildings, you know, just sort of, I looked at William Christmas Library a couple weekends ago when I was there judging for debate tournament. The library compared to what I remember when I was a younger person and even judging there from my first child, you know, 10 years earlier, that library in their facility seems hollowed out. They have very few physical materials compared to what I recall before, because they're using their library space to accommodate classrooms. Students are coming in, primarily their college level coursework is done online. So there's a lack of material in those spaces, and I'm wondering, as we project into the future, what is that impact going to be to our facilities and demand on our physical collection as kids don't have access in their own buildings anymore to that? So there's just some things that are bouncing around in my head as we look forward.
That's a very,
For that strategic planning, I'd like to kind of be thinking about, you know, I don't think, but we could see other districts move toward a shortened school week. I don't see that from what I'm hearing. But certainly Independence is locked in for a couple of years probably.
so we just had a meeting this week with Richard's team about this very topic. I do have opinions about it that I'll save for another time. But what was reported is both branches have seen a significant uptick in use on Mondays. North Independence is well beyond capacity. And we're working on a plan to meet the students where they are. We don't present ourselves as a replacement for school. However, we have very large groups of young people coming in looking to be engaged on Mondays, beginning at, I think, roughly around 1 p.m. Is that right? When we were actually around 11:30, right? And so we do need to make adjustments for at least one of the branches, because they're understaffed and under-resourced when it comes to savings population. The same holds true for homeschool communities. They use a number of our branches. In East Lee Summit, that community is very large. And when it comes to our story times, I'm hearing from a number of our branches that they're beyond capacity. That they simply can't, under current staffing models, add additional story times without relieving one person from a service point on the floor. So it's a good problem to have, but you really have to think about how you serve the community with the resources that you have. I think that this plan will help us in that regard. But yeah, we'll learn more as the year goes on. Yummy, I think you had a question?
Well, I did, but I was just like with what you were saying that like with story times, just, add more story time. I know that there's especially homeschoolers or even some moms very talented in that. So I mean, sometimes it's also engaging the community and allowing maybe a community-led, story time. There's creative ways to, if you don't have the staffing, creative ways to think with involving the community in that. I had one other question and I was so listening, engaged in the I forgot my own question. Yeah. Well, okay, yeah, I remember. Okay. So regards to what's happening at headquarters, was there a conversation we had another time that maybe possibly some of the things that happen here could be happening at other places?
These are all ideas that we're considering. I mean, when I referenced North Independence, yes, there's areas there that could be repurposed. But again, you want to be thoughtful and really intentional about how you do this. I mean, I think there are groups here that would welcome the idea of working out in the community. And I think the majority of the senior leadership team kind of share my opinion that there's something lost in not being connected to the community you serve. This building, you walk in and there's a little waiting area. But other than what we see passing by our windows, we're not really engaged at this level. And I think there's a lot of benefit from rethinking how this building lays out and whether or not there should be space available to the public. I'm not proposing another library. I'm just saying a way for the public to use the facilities that they've invested in, so. But to answer your question, yes, all these things are. All right. Well, I mean, I think this was a rewarding conversation. I mean, the details will come. I mean, we're working diligently to provide you with the details that you need to make decisions about the budget. And those will be coming in about a month or so, or maybe a little less, actually. And if there are no more questions, no reason to sit here and twiddle our thumbs. I would imagine you guys probably want to take a break before the next board meeting. But thank you again for listening to us. It's a little bit different than last year, but I enjoyed, sharing my vision with you.
Yeah, thank you. If there are no more questions.
I just want to say to Aaron and to Jeremy, you guys made a great presentation. Really enjoyed it. So refreshing, so different from the way things have happened before. So I really appreciate all the work that was put into your presentations. And Susan, you were a huge part of that too. So not to minimize anyone else's input into that, but
Yeah.
I think just we're on a more collaborative track.
Sure.
And I really see that as a huge asset.
If I may thank one more person, Staley and his team are responsible for these beautiful slides and photographs of our staff. So it would have been quite boring if we didn't have these beautiful images to look at. The directive really was to go out and take pictures of life as it is today. And I think we got a great cross section of the community we serve. So thank you, Jim.
I guess I come up for the last comment. About a year and a half ago, the selection committee was introduced to 3 Cs, and I would add a 4th one. And we were told about creativity, collaboration, communication, and
Consensus.
what,
Consensus, I think is one of them.
whatever the 4th one was. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think in this presentation, you just see how that morphs from words to actually a not just a vision, but a plan. And what struck me among all the points, but in particular, was this whole collaborative effort with other organizations. And I think Fairview so well illustrates that from a collaborative effort with the school district and certain faith-based organizations, great things can be done as a library and also supporting and supplementing what these other organizations do. So to Aaron and all of the executive level staff, and certainly the branch management too, job well done.
Thank you.
Okay. If there are no more, maybe we have a motion to adjourn this special meeting.
I'll make a motion.
That's it.